Good day, my name is Janine Ryan and I am the editor of Farmers Weekly magazine. I am here with Warren Winchester, the General Manager of Impact Investing at Fedgroup. Hi Warren.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me. Pleased to meet you. I think maybe let's start with just contextualizing Fedgroup. So who are you guys? What do you do?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Janine. Yeah, Fedgroup, we're about a 35-year-old financial services company, still privately owned, second generation, busy running the business. Really built the back of our business off commercial property. So we have a host of financial services licenses to be able to provide services to various businesses, things like pension funds, commercial property finance. And one of the key strategic directions that was identified about 10 years ago was diversifying our business. So we really developed the skill set around understanding assets and deploying funding into assets through our commercial property book. And our current CEO, Grant Field, identified food security and energy security as two key societal issues that need to be addressed to be able to provide capital into those areas. So around 10 years ago, we then started using our own balance sheet to start identifying these areas as key investment areas to deploy our capital. And we started, in the agri space predominantly, as well as quite heavily entrenched into energy. And really using our own balance sheet, understood the models, understood the various sectors. But what Fedgroup is really well known for is having really specialists within our buildings. So really understanding the core of where we're deploying the funds. So having agri specialists, having energy specialists, having a diverse range of skill sets within the building that we can look at not only all the due diligence requirements and financial requirements in terms of assessing these type of deals, but really gaining a proper understanding of the underlying assets. So in terms of, especially in impact investing, we got guys from farming families, farming backgrounds with financial qualifications who can really understand an asset. So it allows us to get fully vertically integrated into these assets and really be quite flexible in terms of how we structure various deployments of capital into them.
Okay, so when you say assets, just for maybe people who are not that sort of financially literate, which I include myself in that, what do you mean by assets?
Yeah. Obviously, our main specialization is commercial property, so buildings, brick and mortar. But when we talk assets, we could be talking solar systems. So being able to roll out solar systems on commercial rooftops, understanding those assets that are generating the power, but also then in an agri space, understanding the operations. So even though we call them assets, we know they're biological assets in a sense. Having orchards or plants in the ground, it's something that's generating revenue for the guys that we're providing money to. So we really get close to understanding, how long does it take for these assets to yield or for the orchards to come into maturity, and really a focus on those assets.
And how did Fedgroup decide to veer into agriculture? What was that decision process?
For sure. So I think it's really tied to the global issue of food security. So being able to get capital into an area that allows the global issue of food security to be addressed, but also the largest impact in terms of individuals. We know that agriculture has this ability to create jobs, to put people first and really drive value specifically into rural areas. So, because we chose impact investing as a key different diversification strategy, we realized that every transaction we do or every time we're providing money, we're looking at the true impact that we can have around these projects. Agriculture, just due to its nature, really impacts those communities around these farms, but it also impacts, the ability to get food around the globe to be able to secure that need.
So when you say impact investing, so that sort of makes me think a bit of venture capitalism. Is that similar?
It is quite similar. I mean, obviously we do quite a broad set of types of lens. So, we can be anywhere from financing the purchase of a farm to working capital or operational working capital that's needed on the farm. We can look at expansion finance. We can look at asset-backed finance. So it really is like similar to a venture capitalist approach to it by saying, well, in terms of the funding required or the cash required for these businesses, how can we look at providing that full offering to the farmers according to their needs? So a lot of the time we're really looking at driving value creation for the farmers and for these projects around it. So
do you identify something in which you want to invest, or do people approach you and say, invest in me?
So our main focus is more around permanent type crop sectors. So if you're looking at your fruit orchards, berry orchards, something high value, high demand around the world. So we'll assess, supply demand curves. We'll assess, what is the strength of those offtakes, where's the produce going. So our main focus is in the more permanent type crops if we're looking at expansion type finance, because then we can custom build the term of the funding to match the life cycle of those assets. Yeah. So because we still family owned, we don't have external shareholders that we need to be held accountable to, even though we still have shareholders, obviously. Yeah. But, it's not a short-term strategy in terms of how we deploy the capital. We can be involved in a project for longer term because we know inherently agriculture is a long-term play. So a lot of the time, especially if you're looking at orchard type crops, it takes a while for those trees to reach maturity and start generating revenue. Yeah. So we understand those cycles on the farm, and we can match the funding to try match the cash flow cycles of the underlying farming projects.
So how long would your sort of typical investment be in, or typical funding be into one of those crop projects, let's say, one of those crop farms?
Yeah, so if it's an expansion on orchards, it's normally can be anywhere from 7 years, because we know, it could take anywhere from 6 years to be fully commercially viable. But we've done projects up to a 25-year involvement with the farmers. So a lot of the time, we're not just providers of capital. Yeah. So we're coming onto these projects and we're looking at how do we unlock value for the farmers, how do we unlock value for Fedgroup, but also how do we unlock value in the broader ecosystem. Yeah. So we'll look at being able to provide the expansion finance, but then once they reach scale, can we assist in putting up processing facilities? Can we do cold storage? Can we bring energy onto the farm for energy security and try to drive those costs down for the farmers? We really have a partnership-based approach in terms of how we engage in with these guys, because we know we're in it for the long term with them, and we're trying to unlock value for everyone involved in these projects. So even if you look at like a working capital type lending solution, that could be anywhere from 30 days to 120 days, because they've delivered a crop, they're just waiting to be paid by the off-taker. So we can bridge that gap in terms of getting money into their world based on what they've delivered while they wait for the payments. But around the expansion finance, we know we have to have patient capital to be able to match it.
Yeah. What is the criteria that you use to decide who to invest in?
They have to have a proven track record. So have a going concern. So obviously there's the whole business analysis. So we have to apply due care in our financial due diligence that we do on it. Even though it might be a diversification strategy for the farmer to say, well, he's been doing sugar and he wants to do max, we can bring those networks together to help unlock it for him. But a lot of the time it's already a guy who's farming with max or farming with citrus or one of our chosen sectors. And then we'll look at the strength of offtake, any form of collateral that we can bring into the deal. Because at the end of the day, we're still using other people's money to deploy onto these projects. Yeah. So we have to apply due care in terms of where we put in our money and just safeguarding the distribution of those funds. So things like, normal financial statement analysis, strength of offtake, collateral, but we spend a lot of time with the farmers, understanding who they are they the right partners? And then we obviously also assess the impact around those projects. So, how are the employees treated? What's given back to the communities? Do they use the local communities for labor? Could we, through one of our other financial services offerings, bring value to the community? Yeah. Either setting up a trust to be able to drive value and tangible difference in those communities. So because we have so many financial services licenses, we can really look at it holistically and say, well, what else can we drive in terms of that impact? matching the cash flow cycles with how they're going to be able to repay that money in terms of their chosen crop sector.
So when you invest in, let's say, a macadamia farm, you have an investment term or funding term. I don't know, would you call it a funding term or an investment term?
Depends.
Oh, it depends.
Yeah,
Okay.
it could be debt, but we also do play sometimes in equity.
Okay.
You know, depending on what type of funding the project needs.
Yeah.
But yeah, the term.
Okay. Yeah, because the question I'm trying to get to is, what do you guys basically get out of it? So you invest in this farm for, let's say, 20 years, because
Yeah.
can take a long time for, let's say, macadamias to come into production.
Mm-hmm.
What is the outcome really for you guys?
Obviously, we have to make a profit on that distribution of capital. So a lot of the times we can be creative in terms of how we generate that income for us. So, you know, we can link it to actual production. So almost like a shared risk model, that we know that if the farm does really well, we can share in some of that increase in value. So if, you know, macroeconomic factors are affecting it, pricing's good, demand's good, we can ride that wave with the farmers. But a large part of our approach is then also being able to say, well, in a bad year, we're not going to be so rigid in terms of how it is paid back. So really sharing that risk with the farmers and saying, well, to enable the sustainability of the project as a whole, we need to be able to ride the different waves. Because we know agriculture doesn't just follow a straight line in terms of pricing and even production, yield. That's how we get value out of it. But also being able to provide other services and other value into those farms. So like I mentioned, bringing an energy solution, bringing a pack house to them, funding the pack line, really looking at, you know, can we bring group benefits to the project in terms of funeral cover or any other group benefit solution to the actual farm workers. So a lot of the time we're looking at multiple different ways of generating income, but also creating value for the farmers at the same time.
Yeah. In the brief that you guys sent, you know, just about the company and so on and so forth, you were talking about vertical integration approach. So what is meant by that, and to how does it apply?
As an example, I'll give an actual example that happened within Fedgroup. And in the energy space, when we were looking to get into solar, we tried to partner with a whole bunch of service providers to be able to build these solar sites. Nobody wanted to partner with us. It ended up being, you know, engineers within the building climbing a step ladder to be able to put up these solar sites. And very quickly we realized that all through the value chain in these type of projects, be it energy or agri, there's a lot of layers of waste and added costs onto this. So we ended up buying our own EPC, which is, you know, a solar designer and project manager. We developed our own ability to monitor and track the production of those solar sites, look after them, maintain them. And very quickly we realized, you know, being able to own more of that value chain actually brings the cost down. So that's the vertical integration that we're looking at, by saying, well, you know, we can design a solar system, implement it, run it for you, and give you guarantees on the production capacity of the energy. And we really took that type of a model and try to approach it to agri. So now like I said, we'll fund the expansion finance needed to plant out additional orchards and scale the business. We'll look at how do we fund the packing line or a processing facility, bring energy solutions. But very quickly we realized the ability to measure everything is critical, especially in agriculture. So having access to that data, having access to technology to give insights for the farmers is a critical element. So we also have in-house capability of being able to develop our own IoT devices. So we can measure almost anything. If we can find a sensor for it, we can measure anything. So we're able to measure EC and pH of the water. We're able to measure temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, rainfall. You know, anything that is a metric that's important to a farmer, we can roll out technology to give him insights into it. We can put up dashboards. We can set alerts to be able to give additional layers of comfort but it also mitigates a lot of the risks on these projects. So being able to know that it's getting watered when it should be watered, that the water's at the correct EC level, that your fertilizers are working, or that it's at the correct pH for that chosen crop type. So very quickly we realized there's massive amounts of money going into agri-tech around the world as well. So we're always looking for key partnerships in terms of some of these new technological advancements that we can bring onto the projects. Also the ability to help uplift yield, improve the quality of the produce that's coming off these projects. These are all constant engagements we're having with guys around the globe to say, well, what technologies add value to the projects and can help improve the profitability of the projects so that we're unlocking value for the farmers and at the same time for us.
And you said that you're only dealing with crop farmers at the moment, or do you do livestock as well?
We haven't deployed into livestock. Not to say that we wouldn't. I think a societal view on livestock is that it's methane emissions and it's detrimental to the climate. We know that, especially part of a regenerative approach to agriculture, integrated livestock management systems is critical in terms of being able to improve soil life and microbial activity and uplift yields. And it's the way nature's been designed, that herbivores walk around and are constantly on the land. In terms of investing into livestock or providing funding into livestock, we won't look at feedlots or something like that, where it's perhaps inhumane treatments that could come towards the cattle or something like that. So we'll look at more of a regenerative type approach in terms of livestock, but definitely something that we can look at.
So more mixed farming rather than sort of
Correct.
just livestock farming.
Yeah, definitely. And also where they're part of a system. So, free range cattle, but we also look at other types of livestock. I mean, cattle just isn't the only livestock.
Yeah.
If we look at rabbit meat, third most consumed protein around the world, can look at invest into those type of projects. Poultry, even insect farming, we know there's a massive buzz around that at the moment. So we
Nice pun.
I've been saving that one. So we're constantly looking at different types of livestock that we can provide capital into as well. At our heart, we actually a technology company. So we can throw a coin out the window and we'll hit an engineer. There's a lot of, which is weird for financial services. You expect more chartered accountants, but there's only a few of us. And what we've developed is this capability, this technological capability. So I've mentioned the IoT devices and the meters and the dashboarding and the ability to drive alerts around it. But what we've actually developed is a single-use system that runs everything in the business. So whether it's tracking every email that comes into the business, it feeds into a single system. Whether it's a reading on a solar panel, whether it's a temperature reading off a farm, everything's feeding into a central database and a central system that is custom built. We've got teams of developers that are constantly evolving this system. And then we've also developed machine learning capability or AI capability that overlaps all this data that's coming into our world. So having a single source system really enables us to do a lot of interesting things and apply these layers of machine learning. So now we can start to overlay, if we're looking at an agricultural type project, since we've been involved in that project, what's the average temperatures been, where the peaks and lows of it, and how can we overlay the yield that's coming off the farms? So we can almost start tracking a lot of the data and applying machine learning capability over it to kind of identify trends in the data, but also ability to improve the lives of the farmers. So being able to, if we're trying to rob chill units and we're able to put overhead sprinklers that if it starts getting too hot will automatically activate for a farmer, or everything's been driven by this central system that really allows quick turnaround time, quick access to the data, and quick alerting, but also to a degree a sense of autonomy in terms of what you want to happen with that data.
So I guess before you decide to fund something or invest in something, you have to do a kind of risk analysis, and all of this is used to do that kind of analysis.
100%, yeah.
Okay, very interesting. A bit like an insurance company would follow a similar type of model.
Correct. So, I mean, we even have, all the research we can find on a chosen sector. If it's a new sector we want to go into, we can feed into our central database and start extrapolating that information to identify global trends, or, using a single touch of the system to be able to get reports out of it for us as part of our research into these different sectors. And then also the ongoing management of the deals. So being able to identify the macro trends in macadamias, for instance. We know they've had a couple of bad years. And try almost help with our pricing around it as well. So really looking at that risk versus benefit connection, but also ongoing management of it, and just ease of use of accessing that data.
It's difficult to predict though, because it's so volatile, especially the global markets.
100%.
Like with the commodities like wheat and maize.
Yeah.
One year they do fantastically, the next year there's COVID and everything goes to hell, sort of situation.
Yeah.
So how do you mitigate that sort of risk, or do you just sort of accept that it's part of the industry, I guess?
So I think we have to accept that it's part of the industry, but I think the way we mitigate it is the time frame that we're involved in the projects. So we know it's going to go through peaks and troughs and cycles. In terms of the pricing and the demand. Being involved for a longer period of time allows us to smooth that out to a degree, but also we look at other ways of being able to mitigate some of the potential risks. So if we're looking at like water security, we might, on one of our projects, we funded the building of a dam to be able to secure water for that farmer for up to 3 years in the event of a drought. Then we'll look at being able to mitigate it through the use of technology. So like I mentioned, overhead sprinklers, or being able to rob chill units, or even activate heat fans if there's a potential frost event. So being able to also look at how do we mitigate the risks in our world, but also the farmers' world throughout that involvement in the project is quite critical to our approach.
And how many farmers are you currently working with? Or?
Sure. We've deployed... Yes, I would probably say into at least 100 different farmers at the moment, perhaps even more. We do a lot of these short-term type working capital deals, and probably involved in around 12 different sectors within agri at the moment. So obviously we're looking at, in terms of our world, being able to diversify our risk as well. Because we know blueberries might have 5 bad years, but macadamias are doing well, or the citrus juice price is through the roof, so we're exposed to citrus in a degree, and that allows us to diversify our book as well, so that we can ride those risks that you mentioned in terms of the different sectors. But it's also a key strategy for farmers these days. A lot of the time you're finding guys, they might have a core product that they're involved in, but a lot of the guys are trying to consider ways of bringing additional revenue streams onto their businesses as well, so that they can also ride those risks in terms of just being exposed to one type of product.
Yeah, it's all about diversifying these days.
Exactly.
Because of that, because you can never know exactly what's going to happen with the price of one particular crop. And also with the citrus and the EU's regulations on citrus imports from South Africa, making it very difficult for citrus farmers to remain profitable in the long run.
100%.
Yeah, so it's a big problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the other approaches is how do we mitigate climatic risk?
Indeed.
So we know black swan events are becoming more like flock of swan events. Every year it seems that there's a black swan event in one of the sectors in agri at the moment. So what are ways of being able to combat climatic risk, especially around, frost occurring where it's never occurred before, flooding or droughts, so we're really also trying to approach sustainability in almost 3 different areas. So sustainability of the business in terms of the commercial sense or the business sense, sustainability around the people. So how do we make sure the communities buy into these projects, the communities have value created out of these projects, not through just employment, but also, thinking outside of the box. So education is very big in our world. We really put people first, and we look at how do we perhaps improve the education levels in these local communities. So a lot of the farmers they take it quite personally in terms of these communities that's around them, and they want to really add value to them. So some of our guys, they either put in some of the kids from the employees through private schooling, or they're looking at building schools and being able to get teachers into those schools. So education's very big in terms of the people element, and then sustainability in terms of climate and environment. Yeah. So being able to utilize more climate smart agriculture type approaches, more regenerative techniques, looking after the soils so that you can withstand droughts, but also let it act as a sponge when there's too much water so that the water percolates through and doesn't damage those crops. So a lot of those times we're trying to bring climate smart agriculture into the projects through our various networks.
Yeah.
And being able to bring that as a value add beyond just capital that we're providing to these farmers.
Which I think is what sort of makes you guys stand out a bit more, is that type of impact investing.
Yeah.
Is that it's not just about ultimately making money at the end of the day, but also about sustaining the environment and adding to the community. Is a really great thing to see. And then I think finally, just from your perspective, just personal perspective, what do you see the future of agriculture for South Africa?
Yeah, I'm super passionate about it, and I think agriculture is, one of the oldest industries around. People are never going to have to stop eating, and South Africa as an environment for agriculture just stands out across the world. We know that source of origin of products that come out of South Africa are sought after around the globe, that all our best produce reach the best markets, especially in a European or North American sense. And we have the ability to grow such a diverse range of different crops. We have so many microclimates around the country. We have some of the best farmers in the world in South Africa, some of the most resilient farmers. So I think, there's such potential still in the South African agricultural sector. And, that's also why we've started looking outside of our borders as well. Throughout Africa, 70% of the world's arable land is left in Africa. There's also the opportunity to have the biggest impact through agriculture into those people's lives around the whole continent. So we're very bullish around it, and it's definitely a sector that we're going to remain involved in for as long as we can.
Glad to hear it.
We also know we need to get funding into the hands of those farmers that maybe might not meet a checklist exercise for some of the other funders. So we're also looking at, in terms of ticket size, where can we play? Like maybe some of the larger financial institutions don't get or don't deploy capital into those type of farms that aren't mega boors or that meet the metrics in terms of the boxes that need to be ticked. So we'll try look at that, like small to medium all the way up to large type deployments of capital. But we also want to look at how do we start attracting foreign money. How do we provide that platform for farmers to get access to international money to deploy into them. That's a big capability we're trying to build out in terms of being able to be a conduit for international money into the South African sector or the African sector as a whole. And so how do we just streamline some of the reporting requirements for these farmers? How do we use tech to be able to provide automated reporting and compliance and audit and everything for the farmers? Because we know that's becoming more and more relevant, especially if you want to export your produce. So how do we streamline that for farmers alongside the capital we get into them?
Yeah, because I think there's so much red tape around that. It's a very difficult process to navigate.
Exactly. And that's why we chose impact investing, as the naming convention that we wanted around it. So we're not ESG, we're not tick box exercises. We're looking for tangible impact, on the ground impact of what these investments can do, especially around people, planet, and then profitability.
Yeah. And I was very happy to hear you sort of mention the sort of middle farmer, because we often speak about small scale farmers and then the big commercial farmers, but those sort of in between farmers that are not like big commercial farmers, but also not small scale farmers, they often get neglected in these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great that you guys are actively trying to actually help those farmers as well.
And so on that note, I mean, we are still a family business, and those type of family principles permeate our culture, permeate the whole business. So we're really looking for those type of family farmers that we can back as well and help them scale and help them remain an element of agriculture in South Africa that is critical to the success of it. So, that's also why we've chosen to focus on that area, is really to get the value into those type of operations.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I think I've learned a lot, which is always great.
Yeah. No, always enjoy nice speaking to Farmers Weekly that I have been reading for so long and has led a lot of my self-education in this
I'm very happy
area.
to hear that. So we'll keep doing that, or we'll try at least.
Yeah.